This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Coffee Fueled Stories. Coffee Fitness Unicorn. Coffee Fitness Unicorn. Hello. It's me, Coffee Fitness Unicorn, your pocket DJ. And you're listening to Coffee Chats Podcast, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. This week's special guest is author Kalvin Ellis. He is a father, filmmaker, and storyteller. We deep dive into his characters and share some Easter eggs. Nerd out with us as we discuss pop culture, the paranormal, and cryptozoology. Are you a member of the Sasquatch Search Squad? Leave an answer in the Spotify question poll. Link in the show notes. Thank you for listening and hanging out in my virtual coffee spot. These unique stories are created from the heart, and it means so much to me that you listen and share. Please leave a review if this show speaks to you. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And lastly, tell all your friends and family to go forth and be magical. Hello. It's me, Coffee Fitness Unicorn, your pocket DJ. And you're listening to Coffee Chats Podcast. Today's special guest is author Kalvin Ellis. Hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
This is awesome. So I'm holding your book, In the Hills Above the Gristmill. Did I say that correctly? Gristmill?
You did, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the book is about a paranormal investigator who she's just starting up a YouTube channel, and she gets a call to head down to the Appalachian South to help investigate some murders that a preacher there believes may be caused by a Sasquatch.
I, as a kid, was fascinated with monsters. That's Loch Ness Monster. And I didn't realize, and your book actually clarifies, so thank you for that, the difference between Bigfoot and Sasquatch. So I don't think this is a spoiler, though, to explain the difference.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Would you like to explain the difference, please?
Sure.
Right.
And so there's different schools of thought on this. I have been in arguments with people who are like, no, Bigfoot is the genus of the Pacific Northwest thing that we call Yeti or Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But the kind of the most widely accepted thing is Sasquatch is kind of an overarching term, and Bigfoot is a specific Sasquatch. So it's the name of that specific Sasquatch, which is the one from the Valentine film, from like the one that we all know with the turning and the Patterson films. Yeah.
Very cool. And now, have you ever dressed up as?
Have I ever dressed up as Bigfoot? No, I have not yet. I mean, I've been a couple other things, dressed up as a couple other things for various purposes, all innocent, work related mostly, but I've been a bear and a marmot, but never Bigfoot.
Did you always know you were going to write a book? Like, was this book in you?
I don't know if this one was in me, but there was a bunch of others in me. My entire life, I've known I was going to be a writer. It's just the thing that, not necessarily of novels. I actually wanted to be a filmmaker my entire life. And so I wanted to tell stories. And as I got older, I just started running out of what I considered running out of time, because I have 3 kids and I was raising the 3 kids and I put the kids first. The time to make a movie just started to dry up a little bit. And then finally, my girlfriend said, why don't you write a novel instead? If you don't have time to make movies because you don't have time to find people to work with, do this, just on your own. And I had been writing for, short stories and novels and stuff, but just for fun. And so then I kind of redirected my focus and said, well, I'm just going to write a novel and we'll see what happens. And then I kind of pulled just, I've got a friend, she's at Flannel and Folklore on Instagram. Rory, she once got in an argument with me that Bigfoot was scarier than a ghost. And so when she said that, I was just like, well, now I have to write a book about Bigfoot, if that's the scariest thing that you can think of. And so that's where it came from. And so it wasn't necessarily this book that was stuck inside me, just a billion other stories. And this is just the one that came out first.
Very cool. So we can expect more from you then?
Yes. I've probably got 20 or 30 different projects in the works. It's just trying to focus in on them. I have really bad ADHD, and so I just bounce around to a lot of stuff. And so then stuff will just kind of fall out at random. The focus right now is the next Paisley Mott book. It wasn't supposed to be the next thing, but there's been such a high demand for it that I figure if I don't do it, then I'll be disappointing people. And I'm not a big fan of that. So
brings me to one of my questions about your characters, a couple of your characters. King Court, how did you come up with this guy? Because I freaking hate this guy so much. Every time.
Piece of trash.
So kudos to you.
Thank you. So every one of the characters is a little bit of me, as most characters are for most authors. And Courtney is like all of the things that when you're growing up, you see yourself, well, I could be this or that, and you make the choice to be something else. And Courtney is what I would have been had I made every single bad choice. And he's kind of the epitome of, I wanted to, since we've got influencers in the book,
yes.
And I've got most of my friends are women, and I have to hear these horror stories of what they deal with online. And I've got daughters, and they're starting to tell me about the things that they're dealing with online.
Creepers,
and so,
yeah,
these just horribly creepy kind of incel types. And I was thinking, like, what is the worst thing that somebody, an influencer, would have to deal with that is not related to the paranormal? And that was these men. And Courtney kind of just came from that. Originally, there was a chapter in the book that was Courtney's backstory, and it was actually a real life event that happened to me. And he made just a decision to do something negative with that, whereas I chose to do something positive with that event. But I took it out because I didn't want him to have any sympathy. I didn't want you to, even for a half a second, to be sympathetic to Courtney, because he is just a terrible, terrible human being.
I totally get that. And you can either be a victim or a victor.
Yes. And
I choose to be a victor. The whole purpose of the show is to deep dive into the book and not probe into your psyche. So
two are so tightly connected, though.
They are. Sheriff.
Yeah. Grover.
Is he also part of you then?
Absolutely. So he's probably the most, people that read the book that know me personally in my personal life will message and say, this is just because he's a writer. He's obsessed with Stephen King. And there's a mention that he was a security officer at a botanical garden. Well, I worked for a very long time as a director of safety and security for a botanic garden, as well as director of operations for a botanic garden. So he is very much, like, on the surface level who I am. So I took little pieces of myself and then just assigned them to each person, not really for their intent, but for their personality. And that Grover got a lot of that external, like, protector type personality.
Very cool, because he's my favorite. Well, after Paisley. So those two characters are definitely, they hold a special place in my heart. And I believe, in my mind, I'd like to think that my moral compass points due north at almost 99.9% of the time. Yeah. Every now and then we're questioned, right? We're
human. Yeah.
We are. And sometimes you're like, well, should I do that? And then you're like, no. So that's the Grover in me, right? Mm-hmm. That's the Grover in you. So that's totally awesome. Speaking of sheriffs, now I've been hanging on to this. Blazing Saddles.
Yes.
Okay.
I laughed so hard because you messaged me and said, have you seen Blazing Saddles? And I knew you probably hadn't gotten to the point where I call it out in the book.
I had not. So in the beginning of your book, there was something about, I think it was the bacon scene. She's making bacon. Hyacinth is making bacon. And she says, like, what her limit is on bacon.
Mm-hmm.
And my automatic first response is always to say, well, 15's my limit on Schnitzengruben. And so that's why I was like, hey, have you seen Blazing Saddles? So I'm literally like chapter 2 in your book. And then when I get to page 186 and you actually mention Blazing Saddles, I lost it.
I was really excited when you sent that, because they're just like, I can't wait for you to get to this point. And it just like, it's like an extra payoff that wasn't even in the book.
Oh my God, I can quote that movie. So I saw that movie as a child. That was my father's favorite movie. And he used to quote it all the time. And then I honestly, I think I've probably seen it anywhere between 20 to 40 times, not in its entirety 20 times, but like probably 40 times anytime it came on TV.
Yeah.
And, are you chewing gum in line? Like, I mean, I literally can just start randomly throwing out quotes from that movie and scenes.
I love that.
Do you have a favorite character and quote, or is it just like the whole movie is your favorite movie?
The whole movie. I grew up in my parents owned a video store, and so I spent my entire life watching movies. And Blazing Saddles was one of those ones I always had to watch, because I was a huge fan of Westerns and a huge fan of comedy, and Mel Brooks just seemed to get me. And so I would watch, that movie would be on a play constantly. And there's a lot of pop culture references in the book, and some of them, like Blazing Saddles, is an older reference. And so but I had to put it in there because I was like, this is true to me. Might not be true to Paisley, but it's true to me. And so I had to kind of drop it in there. And luckily Grover is a little older than the rest of them. And so he was capable of seeing that connection.
For sure.
So I could put it in there.
And especially because he's African American.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and he wore a blazing saddle, he like, and I was like, this is so wrong. I know I shouldn't be referencing these, what you were talking about in the book, but I had the movie in my head. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking there's references to, they are in Appalachia. Mm-hmm. And so, we associate that with, super country, mm-hmm. inbred, and, mm-hmm. some of the things like Mongo. And so the fact that you added that at the very end, like it just felt like, for me, it was all of the silliness of my childhood with the awesomeness of your book. And it was like this Venn diagram, and they just collided in the middle. It was so awesome. So thank you. I'm
so glad you got all of that from that, because that's exactly how I felt about it. Like writing those things and saying, well, I'm going to drop them in here. And that's really heavy, because we know that those predispositions exist in a lot of those areas. And it's kind of hinted at in the book that those things exist. And so, but to be able to add that silliness into it and kind of hang a lantern on it and be like, well, yes, but you can have a sense of humor about it because this person does. It helped me a lot be able to write that out, and I'm glad somebody else picked up on it.
The pop culture references, I really enjoyed how you put when she would go online, she would start to do a live, and the people who jumped online and who would chime in.
Yeah.
Were those your friends? Like, are those real?
So all of them, every single one in there has a backstory. Like every single one of those screen names is somebody. Like my kids are each one of them. There's a character in there. DJ Rad Maddie was what I call my youngest daughter. I call her DJ Rad Maddie. And then there's actually, some people are going to hate me for giving this away because nobody's figured it out yet. One person has figured it out. There is I mentioned once on Instagram that there is a reference to the movie You've Got Mail, which is one of my favorite movies.
Love that movie.
And one of the screen names is the screen name from You've Got Mail, is NY152. And nobody has been able to, only one person, I keep saying nobody, but that's because only one person so many people have tried, but only one person has found the reference to You've Got Mail. And so NY152 is obviously Tom Hanks's screen name in You've Got Mail. And so it's in there. And the line that he says, it's why they're in the library and she's doing the live in the library. He says, I love books, because Joe Fox is a bookseller.
Right. Fox.
X, yes. Fox. Oh, good. You can spell Fox. And then two names above that is WWKKD, which stands for what would Kathleen Kennedy do, or Kathleen Kelly do, which is Meg Ryan's character's name. And so there's two little names in there, but all of them are somebody that I know or named after something, or just people that I know. It's just easier to come up with them that way.
That is so cool. So I guess these are like, those are called, that would be an Easter egg then,
yes,
right?
Little Easter eggs that nobody but me will ever get.
Very cool. And that's the beauty of what authors do. I love when you guys do that. And that we can, you can share these little nuggets. Mm-hmm. And so I like to call them a little nugget. You were mentioning about movies. Mm-hmm. Your photography page is freaking phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
Your eye is, I was like so blown away. So should you ever get the opportunity to make your movies, mm-hmm. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty freaking spectacular.
Well, thank you.
So you've got a fan before you have even started the project. So I will gladly share and like spread the word, because based off of your book, based off of the conversations that we've been having, and based off of your photography, I know you're going to freaking you're going to hit that one out of the park.
Well, thank you. I did make a movie once before. It's actually this, I don't know if you can see this poster here, the lights shine on it. It's Big Driver, Stephen King's Big Driver. I get to make that as a short film for with permission from Stephen King, and so I got to do that. It didn't get seen for a lot of different reasons, but I got to make it, and so I learned a lot from that experience. And after that is when I really took up photography, because I was just like, well, I got to learn more so that the mistakes I made during that don't happen again. So
have you noticed how Coffee Fueled Stories doesn't have any ads? That's because I work tirelessly to keep this show alive. After 3 years on my own, I've decided I need to ask for your help. I've never asked anyone to subscribe. I've never asked anyone to leave a review. I've never asked anyone to rate the show. And I've never asked anyone to pay to listen. There are a few ways you can help support the show. I've created a Patreon page, Coffee Fueled Stories, and a subscription section on my podcast website. It's simple to support and help me keep my dream alive. Just click the link in the show notes to set up your paid subscription option. It's that easy. Thank you for your support. Holy freaking okay. Big Driver from Full Dark No Stars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That story haunts me to this day.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Oh my God. Out of all of the stories that are in that one, even though they did turn, I think it was 1927, mm-hmm. They turned that one into, they turned that one in, but Big Driver, I have every time I think about Big Driver and what happened in that story, mm-hmm. I get goosebumps. Like the fact that you did that is absolutely insane.
Well, a lot of like the Courtney stuff came from the feeling, because I wanted Courtney to feel like Al Strensky. What's Al Strikey? Big Driver, the Big Driver himself.
Big Driver. Holy crap!
So I wanted that kind of same feeling, and so I put a lot of that into Courtney.
Oh, that is insane! Because, like I said, that. I don't remember all of the stories. I know there's a driving one. Mm-hmm. And then of course, the 1922. But Big Driver is the one that just haunts me. It sticks with me. Yeah, and so that's so I love that. That is so cool. So I just saw you drinking there. Is that coffee by chance?
It's just water. I don't drink coffee. I know that's sacrilegious to say on this show, so I'm just.
It is not. It is not. Everybody has their. We all have our go-to drink, and mine just happens to be coffee. So okay. So in that being said, my usual question is how much coffee do you drink in a day? But in that case, we're going to talk about water, because I suck at water consumption.
So do I.
Okay, so how much coffee?
It's shocking that I'm drinking water, but my water bottle was just recently cleaned and sitting on the counter, and so I was like, hey, I'm going to drink water. Usually I drink soda. I'm terrible. I shouldn't, but I do. I drink a lot of soda. I don't drink enough water, and so I was like, I'm going to drink water this time.
Good for you.
I'm a good boy.
I'm on my. This is my second cup. So
I love your mugs, by the way. And I'm going to grab one off Redbubble.
Thank you.
I
I
saw you had the
appreciate
link
that.
up. So.
Thank you. Yeah, this was kind of like my dream was to be a DJ as a kid. And my mom just wasn't having it. She was like, "No, you're gonna get a real job." And so I was like, "Okay, I'll get my degrees and I'll go work and do the thing." And so this goes back to you can either be a victim or a victor. So I was a widow, and so I went from widow to winner. So this is me on the other side of going through the hell that I went through. And part of it is doing the podcast and connecting with people. And because the whole reason I got my degrees is because I believe we as humans connect through storytelling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
100%.
we've been doing that before we even knew how to read and write. We've been telling stories around the campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, when I made that connection, as a child and with stories and falling in love with literature and words at 9 and 10, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to I want to get paid to read books and I want to get paid to write.
Is that asking too much? I don't think so.
Is like, that's a great career. And so, my path was very long, very, very, very hard. And here I am 35 years later, wearing headphones, speaking into a microphone, talking with guests about their awesomeness.
I love that.
And I had to get a coffee mug to represent that.
That is awesome.
Thank
you. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for being part of this experience. Like this is, you are actually the first guest for this month from my little break. So thank you.
Thank you.
I felt kind of rusty this morning. I was like, I should probably like make sure that's why when I texted you and I was like, we're still on for today, right?
I've been looking forward to it.
I have too.
Yeah. I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, but then I heard Braden on and he's awesome. And just yes. the questions you were asking Braden I was just like, this is what conversations should be. This is what conversations should be like. This is what authors want, is somebody like, I've been interviewed a bunch of times and I've enjoyed all of them, some more than others, but there's been a couple of times where it's just like the standard questions and it doesn't feel like a conversation. Luckily, most of the folks on Bookstagram are really good and love having conversations because they genuinely care about books. It's not a job for them. Yes. And so when I heard your conversation with Braden, I was like, yes, I want that conversation. And here I am.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, no. And by the way, I love your shirt.
Thank you. I don't know if you can see the bottom, but there.
Oh, that's cool how it's reflected.
Yeah.
I have, so I went to a Comic-Con, I can't remember if it was San Diego Comic-Con or Long Beach Comic-Con, but it was one of my first Comic-Cons. Long Beach, it was my first one. And this creator came up with baby characters, and they had baby Boba Fett, baby Michael, baby Jason. I lost it. And so your shirt kind of reminds me of that little baby horror creeper. I love it. And that's the beauty. Like, I love how have you been to any of the cons?
I've been to San Diego once, and then I go to Denver, has a Comic-Con. Well, it used to be Comic-Con, and then it was something else. Now it's Fan Expo. And I'm actually Fan Expo is who does our big con here in Denver, and I'm on the board. I'm the vice president of the board that puts it on. So I have a lot of involvement with the con in that way.
How cool is that?
It's a lot of fun.
Oh my God. I was going to say, I'm like, and you get the behind the scenes, not just the side that, I only know the front side, which is as being exactly as being a fan. But the setting up and the logistics, I can actually nerd out about that stuff. Like, I get very excited about that stuff. So
me too.
Oh yeah. But that's a podcast for another episode. Or just a private conversation, because I don't know if anybody's going to nerd out about it, the way that we will.
Yeah.
So I want to get back to a couple of questions here. Your name is a pseudonym.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have multiple pseudonyms, or is this just your solo one?
So this is the primary one. I have a couple others that I used to just publish like a couple of short stories. And the primary reason for a pseudonym, one, I'm not a huge fan of my given name. And I'm also a CASA, and so I do a lot of that's a court-appointed special advocate. And so I work a lot with foster kids and foster kids who have been through a lot and suffered a lot of neglect and abuse. And so one of the folks over at CASA said, if you're going to publish horror books, you should probably have a pseudonym so that people aren't connecting the two and saying, well, this person can't work with kids because they write this horrible stuff. And so I went with a pseudonym. But before that, I had used a couple. I wrote under Kidman Teller. I published some short stories under Kidman Teller. And then I did a podcast with like a pretty successful podcast using the name Kid, just because Kid was my nickname for a really long time. And so I went with Kidman Teller because Storyteller. And then when I was publishing this book, I needed a pseudonym, and I went with what I was trying to name my son when he was born 20 years ago. I tried to name him Kalvin Ellis, and my ex-wife said yes first. And then when my stepdad said, oh, it's a pseudonym for Superman, because Kal-El is Superman's real name. And when she found that out, she was like, no, you can't use that. So I've been holding on to that one. I've kept it in my pocket for 20 years. And now it's my pseudonym.
Good for you. Like, because I think it's a great name. Because of course the reason I asked you about that was because I was like, hey, do you know so-and-so? Because I went to basic training with a person who had the similar last name. And you're like, no, that's a pseudonym. And I was like, okay, disregard that question then. That being said, cryptozoology.
Yes.
Are you a fan of cryptozoology and paranormal?
Yes, huge fan of the paranormal and cryptozoology. And in the next book, the second Paisley book, we actually meet a new character, Darius, who goes by Darian. He is a young kid that's obsessed with it as well, and he does a podcast, and he talks all about cryptozoology. And that character is like that huge part of me. And Paisley's got a lot of that too. I did for 17 years. I wrote and curated a haunted ghost tour of one of Colorado's most haunted places. And we were the second most popular tour in Colorado, haunted tour in Colorado, behind the Stanley Hotel, obviously, because thanks, Stephen King.
I was just going to ask, was it the Stanley?
No, I wish it was, but I did, when the Stanley once tweeted about somebody had tweeted and put the Stanley and me in the same tweet and said, I'm pretty sure Kalvin Ellis's tour is scarier than the Stanley. And the person that curates that tour tweeted back and said, challenge accepted. And I said, if you come on the tour, and if you don't think it's the scariest tour in Colorado, the most entertaining tour in Colorado, I'll tweet out that yours is the best. And if it is, you have to tweet and say that mine is the best. And they tweeted out and said that mine was the best tour in Colorado. So it was a big win for me because I love the Stanley and their tour. So I was kind of obsessed with ghosts and the supernatural. And in addition, like you said, the first time you hear about Nessie, and you think you hear about Sasquatch and stuff like that, and you think that there is a possibility that these things are real. It's hard not to get obsessed with them. And so when I was a kid, I would watch every movie I could find, or next door to my parents' video store was a used bookstore. And I would go next door to the used bookstore and find books about cryptozoology. And, when you're little, you think everything that's printed is true. And so I would go over and find these cryptozoology books. And I read a book about chupacabra once, and I was just like, oh my God, the New Jersey Devil's a thing. And like, just really bought into it hard. Which was fantastic when you're a kid, because then everything scares the living daylights out of you. So yeah, big fan.
Oh my God, that is so cool. So one of the things I was wondering was when, and sorry, real quick before I get farther off topic, but thank you for doing what you do with these children and the kids. Like, so not only are you an amazing photographer, an excellent writer, you are a true good freaking human. Like, I was trying not to cry. The reason I kind of had to get off topic was like, I'm gonna cry because this guy's got a big ass heart, and I'm just like, so like, I'm like, I just want to give you a big hug because I'm just like, oh my God, this guy freaking rocks. So that's why I was like, okay, now I'm gonna have to like stop because I'm gonna get really emotional on that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for saying that. I love working with the kids, and it's really an honor to be kind of the voice for kids that don't have a voice for themselves.
Like the other beauty of horror, like I find horror to be very cathartic,
Yes.
And Big Driver would be an excellent example of that catharsis and how there is justice. And we're not going to give anything away, but the voice of the voiceless. So like the creepers that the influencers have to deal with, you give voice to the voiceless. So even though you're doing, your work with the court and with children in that regard, you still also address it in the book. That you got a big heart for that. Like, thank you for that. Like that means a lot.
I did. There's a character in the book, a younger character, a kid in the book, that is kind of that for me, that representation of like, here's something that happened to this kid that goes kind of unresolved. It's a little bit of a spoiler to say it goes unresolved, but that is kind of where I was coming from with that, is a voice for the voiceless. Like, this thing happened to this person and nobody ever knew what, and then now it's kind of come to light. So that's that part of the thing. And saying that all these characters are part of me, that character is part of me as well, because I went through the foster care system. I feel like I fell through the cracks and I felt like I was abandoned, and that's why I do what I do with Casa, to try to like pick up some of those pieces and catch some of those people that fall through the cracks, and then put that in the story as kind of that representation of myself.
This goes back to the victor and the victim. Like, you have chosen to rise above, be the phoenix, come through the other side, use your strength to share. I know we've talked about like blazing saddles and like silly things, but like, seriously, I'm just like, I just want to hug you so much right now. So thank you for being so open and honest and vulnerable, and sharing yourself, because that's, not everybody, wants to open up like that. So thank you for that. I
thanks for letting me.
Like, it's a safe space. This is a safe space.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we have a couple more questions I have your book here, and in your book you have the cute little feet stamp. Are you stamping all of those? Are you hand stamping those?
Yes, every one that gets ordered from my website, or somebody wins in a contest, or I send out, any book that I sign, I will stamp if it's coming directly from me. There's some like that I'll be out and somebody will be like, hey, we sign this, and I don't have the stamp with me, and I can't sign it then. Or if it's like purchased from a store that is signed, like there's a couple of local ones that I'll go and sign the books there, and I don't stamp those. So if it comes directly from me, from my office, I will stamp it.
That is so cool. Like, what was that? Just like something that popped into your head? You're like, I'm going to hand stamp all of my books that I send out.
Yeah. And so, yes, I'll stamp it with the little footprint stamps, and then the Sasquatch searchers stamp as well, like in red. I'll usually put on the inside cover or somewhere in the book, and then I'll put it on the so in the hardcover, I'll usually put it like kind of right on the inside here. It's not here yet because I haven't signed this one. And then I think on the paperbacks, I'll usually do it on like one of the front cover or the back cover.
This one. That's
the one. Yep. The Sasquatch Search Squad. Yeah.
That is so cool. Are you going to do anything like, are you going to turn that into like a t-shirt, a stamp, or a hashtag?
I've got a couple of little things. So when the next book comes out, I'll have a different stamp, and then working on some bookmarks and stuff that have stuff like that on there, that part of the Sasquatch Search Squad. So I'll have a couple of things. I just haven't gotten around to doing them. I should have done them when the book came out originally. It was supposed to release in March of 2020, which is when COVID kind of hit. And
yes.
Amazon, and I released it through Amazon, and Amazon had changed their policies, and so they actually released the book 2.5 months before it was supposed to come out. And so everything got messed up, and there was supposed to be a little book tour that happened, and COVID kind of ruined that. And so all the stuff that I had planned for marketing the book kind of just went away. And so it's just been instead of what was supposed to be this big release, ended up being a very small release. And so I didn't do any of the marketing stuff that I wanted to do originally. So with the second book, I'll do that, but then I'll retro all the originals
in the hills above the gristmill.
Yeah, there's some dark, ugly things that happen in there.
Yes. Speaking of which, I don't want to give away too much, but can we talk about Hollis Grimm a
I would
little
love
bit?
to. Probably the character I've had the most fun writing of any character I've ever written.
And how did you come up with him for this character, like this book?
So before I ever wrote the book or had the idea for the book, I was just I was doing a writing exercise because I was stuck on something else that I was working on. And I was like, I want to write a scene. And I was having a conversation with a friend talking about how religion can be dangerous. You know, the most dangerous thing in the world is a smart man with a Bible. And so I wanted to write a scene that kind of captured what that might look like. And so I wrote the scene that takes place in the church later on in the book, with Hollis giving a sermon. It was a little different when it was just a sermon, and that was it. And then I wrote it, and I really enjoyed like the cadence of it and the dialect of it, and I enjoyed writing a Southern preacher. And then I just left it at that. And it was just like, well, that was a fun exercise. And then a couple months later, I had the conversation with Rory where she said that Bigfoot was scarier than ghosts. And I said, well, you know, Bigfoot's not scary. Nobody really believes in Bigfoot, which I know they do. And I did when I was younger. I don't know that I don't now, but so I was like kind of wrestling with that. I'm like, well, how, if you didn't believe, how would you get somebody to believe? And I'm like, well, religion, you can. And so then I started diving into the Bible and found that there are passages in there, and all the passages in the book are 100% pulled from the Bible. And so they're actually in, the Bible somewhere. And so I kind of grew from there. I was like, well, there's some sort of backstory there that could say that there was a Sasquatch in the Bible. And so that all popped up from there. And Hollis kind of came into view for me then.
Did you always know he was going to drive that particular car?
I didn't. I did not know. That was kind of when I started writing it. That's just what I kept seeing. I was like, if this person was a car, what car would he be? And that's where I was just like, well, obviously he would be that car.
Which is so cool because, of course, I'm not super into cars, and we kind of were messaging about this. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, "Is that the car that was in Phantasm?"
Close,
so you had to correct me on the car, but for some reason I saw him kind of like the Phantasm guy.
Yeah.
And the
tall
car.
Man. Yeah.
The tall man. Exactly. And so I just had Phantasm in my head. So in addition to having Blazing Saddles, I also had Phantasm in my head.
Perfect. I love that. Yeah, because he is described as like tall, and he's got like the long black coat.
Yeah.
Thin. Thin, and driving this long black car. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like the first thing that popped into my head, because that's another one that like stuck with me as a kid.
Oh yeah, me too.
I saw that one on, I think it was Elvira's when she was doing her show, and that was the movie of the week. And I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me. When the ball does its thing, and I was in the car, and I was like, wow, what did I just walk into? Literally, So I had, this goes back to like having the silliness of Blazing Saddles, but also having that intense darkness of like Phantasm, in your book.
Well, thank you. I tried to walk that line of making it, scary. I want it to feel like horror, but also feel accessible to everybody, and so that it doesn't ever feel so heavy that there's no way out. Which the second book is way heavier than the first book.
Wow.
It's a lot darker than the first book, but
okay.
I felt like that's Paisley's arc. She wasn't ready for what's about to happen in the first book, and now she's not ready for what's about to happen in the second book. So
very cool. That's good to know. That's good to know, because you did walk that balance. You did an excellent job of walking that balance of the darkness and the silliness and the lightness, and by using like the influencer, like the conversations, the way that it was like a window. It was a different type of window into the character's world. Speaking of which, one of the scenes that I had messaged you about was the diner scene, and I think you know where I'm going with this. And but if it's a spoiler, I don't want to share it, and we can talk about that offline.
No, it's all right.
The spit on the food.
Yeah. I think everybody worries about that. I know I do. Every time I'm so polite because I want to be polite. I'm not polite because I don't want them to spit in my food.
Right.
But I always think like, did I come across as mean? Now are they going to spit in my food? And so I always worry about it. And so I wanted to add that little nugget of it. And it plays into the kind of the theme of the town is they don't like outsiders. And so this is a very common thing when you're not from the town. They're probably going to spit in your food.
Oh. And the way that you describe it too, because if it's just right on top, then yeah, you're going to be able to see it. Yeah. And so the fact that you describe how they hide the spit in the and like I'm reading and I'm like, whoa, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up just reading this. Like, so again, kudos to you for a thoroughly disturbing scene.
Thank you. I'm always surprised. Like that's, I thought it was funny and gross when I wrote it, but it gets a lot of people will like message and be like, "This is disgusting. Like, why did you put this in here?" And I'm like, "That's small town America for. I mean, that's everywhere for you, but it just goes to the fact that they don't like people from the outside."
Yeah,
I do not endorse spitting in food, and I do not want people to listen to to read my book and be like, "Oh, that's how we should do that." That's right. I've been spitting in food the wrong way this whole time. Let me go do it the right way. I've never done that myself either.
Right? No. So that being said, when can we expect the next Paisley Mott? What is your approximate time frame? I mean,
I had hoped the beginning of this year, and it didn't happen. I've got a little more free time now, and so I'm starting. I picked it back up, and I'm working on it again. So I'm hoping to be finished. I've got another project that I have to finish now. I'm writing a book for the Fright Vision series. It's like a middle grade horror book, and so I'm writing. I was asked to write the penultimate book in the Cursed Coin series, so I'm working on that now. And then I'll really be able to focus on Paisley. I take a little bit of time out to work on like my memoir and a couple of nonfiction things I'm working on. And so Paisley's been kind of taking a back seat a little bit, but now that I've got a little more time, I think I should be able to focus. And hopefully by the end of this year, I'll have a first draft done. And then maybe mid next year, maybe June of next year.
I wanted to ask you one last question. Question came to me actually at the most random time. I think I was like brushing my teeth and I was like, oh, I need to add that to my questions. When you created this book, you flash back from present time to the past. Did you know you were going to do that? Like when you had this book in mind, because your backstory of the Bloom family and how all of that came about was actually like really cool.
Thank you. No, I had no idea. I just, as I was writing it, I don't plot usually. I mean, I have like, right now I have like an overarching thing for the 5 or 7 Paisley books, but I don't know what's going to happen in those books. I know like character motivation and that's it. And if something gets in the way of that character motivation, then the story changes. And that's kind of what happened with that as I was working on it. And then I started noticing that there are things in the town that weren't explainable. And I said, well, I know why they happen, but the reader doesn't know why. And so I was like, I need to put that in there. And rather than just like one character saying, here's what happens, which was originally Boyd Gunnarson's, he was going to be our exposition person. He was going to be the person that could give Paisley the information of like, here's what happened in the town. And as he started to tell her those things in an interview, I thought, well, but Boyd wouldn't know exactly what happened. And so I would rather tell it through a newspaper thing. And so she gets the microfiche and does that. And then we get Hollis's perspective on part of the history. And so I wanted to do it in a way that felt more like Paisley was there instead of just like a secondhand thing. And so that's kind of why I decided I would write it from Herksteiner's point of view.
And so I liked how linear you were going with it, but then like you kind of would like drop down into the past and kind of give us that information. And then you would come back to the present. And I'm like, okay, I have a better understanding of that. Sometimes when stories are Pulp Fiction like, right, where they're all complete
bouncing around,
and so it's taxing. That's the word it's taxing on the reader. And so what I liked about your story is it wasn't taxing. It had a nice flow.
I did worry about that because I wrote it and I was a little nervous about giving multiple point of view and jumping from inside one character's head to another, because I didn't want that. I didn't want it to feel taxing, and I didn't want you to feel like lost. And so the first draft of it, I feel like it got muddied a little bit. And so then when I read through the first draft, I thought to myself, well, I need to make sure that these characters' voices are so set that when you start reading a chapter, you know whose head you're already in. And so as a behavioral specialist, I'm a DISC certified behavioral specialist. And so what I did was I created a behavioral outline for each character. And so that when I was writing, I thought in that behavioral style, like what would this character actually say? And so there are characters that do things, like Boyd does things that most people wouldn't anticipate a character saying and doing. But one thing that's not called out is like Boyd is on the spectrum somewhere. And so he's going to behave in a way that most people are just like, a normal human being wouldn't. Well, what is your definition of normal? Boyd is as normal as they get. Like, he's a nerd who is not apologetic for the fact that he's a nerd, which is also part of me. Look at my office. I'm a giant nerd. And so I was really worried that people would get confused by like, well, we're jumping from this character's head to this character's head to this character's head. And like, how do we follow that? Because I didn't want it to feel disjointed. And so it was all about making sure that the characters were the ones carrying the story and not the plot. That way you could tell, at least if you couldn't follow where you were in the plot, at least you knew which characters you were with.
So why don't we go ahead and just we'll like wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Go forth and be magical. And I would love if you would, however you want to interpret that, or if you have a saying that you would like to share with the readers and listeners.
I do. And I'll go forth and be magical. I'll do that one. But I want to, we kept touching on Superman.
Yes.
And my favorite saying is, you are who you choose to be, from the Iron Giant, because I know I can't be Superman, but I can want to be like Superman, which is what the Iron Giant is about. And so you are who you choose to be is my favorite saying, because that's my whole life has been choosing to be the person I am. So now, with that being said, go forth and be magical.